picture this for a second. An ancient explorer, equipped with a compass and a quill, is out there painstakingly drawing a beautiful map of a vast coastline. Now, they're doing this with the underlying expectation of permanence, right? A firm belief that this map is going to endure exactly as they drew it. But then, well, nature happens. A massive storm washes away an entire peninsula, the coastline shifts, and suddenly, that incredibly expensive map is worse than useless. It's actually actively dangerous, pointing ships straight toward jagged reefs. This is the perfect metaphor for the core crisis of documentation in modern business. We are constantly using beautifully static methods to document a rapidly shifting digital landscape, and it's totally failing us. So today, in this explainer, we're pointing our compass at that changing coastline and diving deep into the source material behind a tool called Peacock Studio.
Okay, let's dive right into this. This agenda serves as our new blueprint. We'll be covering the documentation maintenance gap, structured workflow capture, branching logic and flow, dual modality and tours, solving for UI drift, and lastly, deterministic automation over AI.
Section 1. The documentation maintenance gap. Let's start with a totally universal pain point that spans across almost every single department. Think about it. Why do SOPs go stale so much faster than product docs? The source material points out a really fascinating dynamic here. Product documentation is usually tied to code releases, right? These are visible, concrete events that naturally trigger a review. But standard operating procedures? They're tied to process changes. Someone adds a new approval step in Slack, or maybe a vendor gets swapped out. These shifts happen invisibly. There's no trigger. And as a result, your SOPs become partially correct, which means they are actively dangerous to rely on. I absolutely love this quote from the materials. The exact moment you hit publish, the software landscape starts shifting under your feet. Traditional manual documentation is essentially just a painful form of stop-motion animation. You move a millimeter, take a picture, move another millimeter, take another picture. The psychological friction is just so massive that people eventually just stop documenting altogether. They give up and hoard the knowledge in their heads. And that is exactly the scenario we're trying to avoid. Section 2, Structured Workflow Capture Explained. So let's look at the antidote provided by our sources, Peacock Studio. Now, I have to be super clear right out of the gate. We must firmly stop thinking about this as just another screen recorder. So the crucial point is this definition right here. This fundamentally shifts the entire technical approach. We're moving away from capturing a flat rendering of reality, just dumb pixels on a screen, to capturing a structured digital blueprint of how the work is actually happening. It's building a literal system of record. Let's compare standard video with Peacock Studio to really hammer this home. A generic video recording is entirely dumb. It has zero semantic understanding of your actions. All it knows is that a cluster of blue pixels turned gray at a very specific millisecond. Peacock, on the other hand, intrinsically reads the document object model, or DOM, of the web page itself. It doesn't just record a click at random coordinates. It actually knows you specifically clicked the checkout button. So how do we actually get this digital blueprint? The sources outline a super simple 3-step pipeline. It all starts with a free Chrome extension. You just turn it on, and it sits quietly in the background, silently recording your clicks and inputs. Get this, it even perfectly stitches together full-page scroll captures automatically. That solves that massive annoying headache of aligning screenshots, and it does the whole shebang without you ever leaving the browser. Section 3, Branching Logic and Flow. Okay, so now we have this incredibly rich raw material, completely loaded with metadata. But let's be real. Actual enterprise work is almost never a straight line, right? Ask yourself this. How do we document a process that diverges? Say you get to step 4, and you have to choose between setting up an administrator profile or a standard member profile. Traditionally, you'd either have to duplicate the first 3 steps in 2 completely separate redundant videos, or worse, you make one massive confusing video that forces users to scrub around trying to find their specific path. Peacock solves this brilliantly using a nodal graph database structure. It essentially treats the documentation like a software application itself. At that fork in the road, you just insert a branch point. The user is presented with a clear choice, kind of like a choose-your-own-adventure book. It completely eliminates all that edge case video duplication and prevents cognitive overload because it embeds complex decision trees into a single, beautifully unified experience. Section 4, Dual Modality and Tours. Now, how do we flex this structured metadata into different formats without forcing the creator to duplicate any of their hard work? And this brilliantly illustrates the real power of that structured data. From a single capture event, you get two completely different modalities. First, you get an interactive player, which gives you a focused, live-guided step-through that literally mimics driving the actual application. And then, with just a single toggle, you get a document view. This is a scrollable, CTRL plus searchable reference guide. That means absolutely no more manually pulling screenshots out of a slide deck to create a separate Word document for someone to review asynchronously. Furthermore, you can stitch these individual flows together into what the sources call persona-led product tours. You can organize multiple separate demos into tailored chapters. So think about a sales meeting. Instead of a generic, overwhelming product dump, a prospect only sees the specific narrative story that is highly relevant to their exact role and their unique pain points. Section 5. Solving for UI drift. Let's tackle a phenomenon that haunts basically every fast-moving tech team on the planet, UI drift. The sources validate this massive enterprise friction points with one very simple, painful truth. The UI moves faster than the docs. Software releases change screens so incredibly fast today that manual screenshotting simply cannot keep pace with modern agile development. This is exactly where the Compare Flow Docs feature comes in as a real game changer. Instead of a dual monitor staring contest where you're desperately trying to guess what changed side by side, Peacock literally lets you step through time. You just place your version 1.0 capture next to your version 1.1 capture, and it actually syncs the two documents. It visually steps through aligned indices to flag exactly what changed without you having to do any manual hunting. Section 6. Deterministic automation over AI. Now, this brings us to perhaps the most surprising philosophical core of the entire tool. Now, what's really interesting here is comparing Peacock directly to traditional wikis. Tools like Confluence or SharePoint, they hold the theoretical policies, relying entirely on manual updates. Peacock, however, natively captures the browser DOM, providing grounded interactive execution data. It's explicitly designed to complement those existing tools by feeding them highly accurate embedded walkthroughs, rather than trying to rip and replace them. And notice what is completely, 100% absent from this entire workflow: generative AI. We live in a world that is absolutely obsessed with shoving chatbots into every single platform, right? But Peacock deliberately chooses a totally different path: deterministic automation over generative guesswork. Because it actually reads the underlying code of the page, it uses deterministic rules to auto-generate exact step titles. Think about it. In enterprise hygiene, you need exact execution. You absolutely do not want a hallucinating AI guessing what a crucial button is called. This commitment to enterprise hygiene runs incredibly deep. The tool natively captures environment metadata. It knows the exact browser version, the OS, the screen resolution, which gives QA teams the exact vital context they need to reproduce bugs. Meanwhile, the built-in editor allows you to automatically exclude password fields, blur out sensitive customer names, and add polished backgrounds. That ensures your live API keys never, ever accidentally end up floating around on a public wiki page. And finally, we just have to highlight this incredibly pragmatic capability: the PDF export. As the source material says, and I love this phrasing, it's an exhaust valve for bureaucracy. You can't exactly embed an interactive iframe into a printed dossier for a CFO at a quarterly business review, right? The PDF export bridges that tricky gap between the lightning speed of modern tech development and those legacy offline compliance requirements we all still have to deal with. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a final, provocative thought. Take a hard look at your own organization's operational knowledge. Are you still agonizing over stop-motion animation? Are your SOPs just a beautifully static map of yesterday's shifting coastline? Or are you ready to finally build a dynamic, structured system capable of navigating tomorrow? It just might be time to completely rethink how you capture your work.